Welcome to W5. In trying times like these, it can be helpful to remember moments in history where global citizens, especially Canadians, united to fight a common enemy. 75 years ago, Canadian troops prepared to liberate the Netherlands. It was a brutal and deadly campaign in the final months of World War II. And yet it forged an undying friendship between the Liberators and the people they freed.
Strong, eh? 95 years old.
Fanfare, appreciation, and love is how every Canadian World War II veteran is welcomed in the Netherlands.
Come on, give me a fist.
Don White was just a teenager living in Oshawa, Ontario, when he signed up to fight for Canada. Canadian troops liberated this country in World War II. Now, 75 years since those intense battles, their Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, is also in awe.
In him, we honor all those people who were here, and of course all those people who lost their lives being here. Young people, young men who fought here for our freedom. Sad thing is that Don White one day will not be there. And we've seen it also with the First World War, that at one moment almost everybody died who had survived the war. And then we have to bring this further and onwards to the next generation. That's exactly what you do. Look at all these young people here. Because people understand that living in a free country is not normal, and you have to defend that.
Oh, I love this. Can we have more?
Thank you very much for all you did for us.
It's been a real pleasure to be here.
I'm always thinking about my own grandfather, and he also was in the war, but in Poland. He was in a camp in Poland. It was a really hard time, and he didn't dare to speak about it. So after he died, I know the history of him, and now I have so many respect for everyone of you. So.
I got lots of mixed emotions coming here because just the way the people treat you, and I don't know how to say it. I don't want this, but I'm glad that I was able to do this so that they do it back to me. You know, it's kind of a vicious circle.
Don enlisted in 1941. At the time, things didn't look good for the Allies.
Well, the war was going pretty poorly at that time. We were losing, and I had a little history in the family. My dad's three brothers were all in the First World War as artillery guys, and I heard a little bit about that. And so that's kind of the patriotism came into it, and kind of the thing to do. But I think maybe the big factor was all the girls seemed to like a guy in uniform, so I thought that was kind of influenced it.
Regardless of his motivation, Don joined the military as soon as he could.
Well, when I signed up, my career is when I was 16, it was the militia I joined here. And a militia unit isn't full-time soldier, they part-time soldiers. So I trained on weekend and a couple nights a week in those days. Then when I finally turned 18 and signed up in the full-time militia, I signed up in Toronto. I signed up about 8 o'clock in the morning, got up early, went up there, and 10 o'clock at night I was on a train for Dundurn, Saskatchewan for my training.
For the next 3 years, Don trained on the prairies, learning how to operate the radio and load shells on a Staghound armored vehicle. Then the call came. Don was heading overseas.
In '44, I left Dundurn and went to Halifax, and we got on a boat and went over to England. And I was a few weeks and maybe a couple months in England, then I got sent to Italy. I didn't join up to stay around here, so I was glad I was on the draft overseas.
By the time Don landed in Europe in 1944, there had already been 5 years of brutal and bloody fighting.
Nearly every country around the globe in arms for the biggest battle in history. Don first joined the war on Italian soil, fighting Hitler's Germany.
At 0 hour, they get underway and move down an Italian road, heading for the front, where our guns command an important enemy position across the valley.
You were trained and you had a job to do. And you might be scared, but you knew the guy next to you depended on you, so you weren't going to let him down, and you hoped he wouldn't let you down, so you kind of overcome your fear.
The Royal Canadian Dragoons pushed enemy lines, claiming victory across Italy, signaling a shift in the war. Meanwhile, 1,700 kilometers away in France, Canadian troops prepared for the biggest of battles.
But we kept pushing the Germans back all the time. But they were our enemy. It was our duty. We had to.
Bill Timchuk joined the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment at 19 years of age. He trained in Northern Ontario and then at Camp Borden, daily marches of 15 kilometers and rifle training. He was one of 21,000 soldiers in Normandy, France.
This time it is the real thing. This time it is the 6th of June, D-Day.
We knew D-Day was coming for a year or so before. We knew we were winning the war slowly, and we knew D-Day was going to happen. We didn't want to be on the German heel. We didn't like their ways. We didn't want to be dominated by a foreign country. It was our duty to fight for our country.
Canada was alongside American and British troops, 6,000 ships, 11,000 airplanes, 150,000 servicemen trying to take down the Germans.
In Normandy, the drive inland gets underway from well-established bridgeheads.
But the worst soldiers in the German army were the SS. They were brutal. In Normandy, you taken prisoners, and they were told, take them in a garden, shoot them one by one. Took them back, shot them in the back of the head. We expected to lose men, but it hurts you when your friends get wounded and killed. But we were, by that time, 4 years in the army, you're well trained. You expect that, but it hurts inside. But it's part of the battle.
The horrifying losses of life fueled their fire.
And the German took 11 weeks of hard fighting. They thought it would push us back in the sea, but it didn't. We knew the war was over, only took a matter of time. But we defeated them. They were badly defeated.
With victory after victory, Canadian troops pushed deeper into German-controlled territory, towards Belgium, then the Netherlands. Things came to a head in the Battle of the Scheldt.
My regiment, my division, were the first on the Scheldt. The British Army captured Antwerp a few weeks before, and luckily for them, they captured Antwerp with all the docks intact. We needed that to bring our supplies in, to keep advancing. But it took 4 weeks of hard fighting.
Meanwhile, on the south bank of the Scheldt, other elements of the 1st Canadian Army prepare for an amphibious attack on the Babylon Peninsula and its German strongholds on the north bank of the estuary.
Robert Katzberg has spent his life retracing the military history in his country. He grew up in Oostburg, a town liberated by Canadians in World War II. Today, he spends a lot of time along the shores of the Scheldt estuary.
We're sitting here actually and looking at the Terneuzen Harbor, and the 9th Infantry Brigade crossed the canal here, or the Scheldt River, to Hoofdplaat to make an amphibious landing.
The region was key for supplies. Allies needed to capture it if they had any chance of defeating Germany.
The supply thing was very important to the Allies because they were preparing their push through the Germany, so they needed to stock it up. And the naval guns in Walcheren Island and in Katzand and Knokke, they were, of course, preventing any ship entering the Scheldt. So the Germans were very well aware of the strategic importance of Antwerp, the South Paveland Island and Walcheren Island.
From a seaborne landing in the rear of enemy troops on the Dutch mainland, Canadian carriers raced to smash the Scheldt pocket. Advancing through flooded areas, battered Breskens is overrun. The backdoor assault loosens up German defenses. They attack with such gusto that hardly a stone is left unturned in the annihilated town.
The Scheldt was a tough battle for Bill.
Brutal fight. The Germans set up their anti-tank guns, mined it. It was slow. You couldn't use too many tanks because they couldn't go through water. It was infantrymen's fight. Foot sloggers, go through water, wade through water. A lot of casualties.
He lost a lot of friends.
In all that time of fighting, my regiment lost 199 soldiers. France, Belgium, Holland, Germany. 199.
Some of the fiercest fighting happened house to house in these streets.
Then they advanced to Woensdrecht, and then they were stopped for from the 7th of October until the 24th. Big fight going on here. Every day it's the same. Bloody Germans start shooting, then they stop and the artillery comes in.
Hiding in houses and behind any available obstacle, they have to be flushed out in close-quarter fighting.
Canadians who fought, like Bill Timchuk and Don White, are living legacies for Dutch people.
They never forgot, and we never forgot them. I remember going to a part of Holland, and a Dutch woman comes out of her house with a cup of coffee. And they didn't have real coffee, they couldn't import coffee, but they made coffee out of burnt barley, burnt grain, but it was okay, better than what we had. And she come there, and I'm drinking coffee, and she's walking along with me, because I couldn't stop. And I appreciate that, you know. There they are. They had nothing. The Germans stripped the country bare, and they were still trying to help us.
Don White moved into northern Holland in the winter of '44. He saw firsthand what the Germans had done to the people. They were starving.
And when we saw that, because it was definitely evident in the children, and we told our cooks to go on half rations, and we'd give half our food away, because they hadn't opened the supply routes of food coming in fast enough to really serve them properly. Every time we'd get thinking about we were a little hungry, then we'd think, well, maybe our half went to some family that had to feed 3 or 4 people. So we never complained about being hungry.
Town by town, Canadians fought to bring freedom back to the Dutch. Victories that came with many sacrifices.
You can't fight without losing troops. You feel bad when you lose your friends, but we knew we're winning.
Coming up.
They were defeated. They had surrendered.
A brutal occupation comes to an end.
They were singing, and they were dancing, and they were laughing. It was just something that's unexplainable.
When W5 continues.
From September to April, the Canadian Army pushed through Belgium and the Netherlands, town by town, weakening the enemy, breaking the German stronghold. It all ended May 5th, 1945.
Surrender of all German forces in Holland, in northwest Germany, including the Frisian Islands, to the Commander-in-Chief, 21 Army Group.
We are in Wageningen, and it's interesting because here in this hotel, Hotel de Wereld, the World, the surrender of the Germans in Holland took place.
Scheldt de Gruyter works to preserve this famous hotel and honor what took place inside 75 years ago.
Well, this hotel was really a ruin, and folks chose this hotel because it was empty and the town was empty to hand over the orders how to execute the surrender. So it wasn't really a negotiation. Of course, the surrender is never a negotiation. It was more like giving orders how to do it.
Canada's commanding general officer, Charles Folks, chose this as the backdrop to summon the German commanders, demand their official surrender.
These forces to lay down their arms and to surrender unconditionally.
Yell hopes Dutch people will always remember the sacrifice Canadians made during the war.
What we're trying to do is don't take freedom for granted, work on it, and in that story, it's also to remember and thank the people who liberated you, who liberated your parents or your grandparents. Young Americans, young Canadians, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, they volunteered to come here and fight and, well, lose their lives. So that's really something to remember and to be aware.
Don White remembers the feeling of liberating these towns, letting the Dutch know they could return to their lives. He even wrote home to describe it.
They crowd around the car so badly you can hardly move. Your car is just one big bouquet of flowers that has been given to you. It's hard to explain the feeling, but it was so mixed up. They were singing, and they were dancing, and they were laughing, and they were crying, and they were shouting, all in once. And of course, shaking our hands and clapping us and patting us on the back. It's an atmosphere in the air that I had that day that I've never had since. It was just something that's unexplainable, because 5 years of being confined, and then all of a sudden they're free.
Bill Timchuk remembers too.
It was the first city that Canadians liberated, a good-sized city, Bergen-op-Zoom, and the people were so happy. I remember Germans had to retreat on the suburbs, and the people came out and hugging you and all this and that, so happy. And I'm glad that I took part in it. I'm not bitter at all. I know we lost lives, but that's to be expected. No, I'm not bitter. I'm glad we won, and we got our freedom. We liberate those countries, they got their freedom.
The Dutch people can barely contain their appreciation. So much so, they rolled out a blue carpet and invited royalty to celebrate 75 years since veterans like Canadians Don White and Bill Timchuk fought and won on their soil. Weaving through the sea of orange pride, there's an undercurrent of love for the red and white.
The Allied forces have done a big effort to end World War II. And I hope World War III will not be there again. So that's a good thing to remember. And to honor the veterans, of course, that are still alive.
Because they freed us in the Second World War, and the end of the Second World War. And that's why we're here, because it's very important to celebrate the freedom.
Even the Dutch royal family have a special bond with Canada. Their family protected and given a safe haven during the war. Princess Margriet was born in Ottawa. For her, thanking veterans like Don White is personal.
Mr. White.
It's a pleasure to be here, Your Royal Highness.
So good. As a special symbol of our gratitude and friendship, I would like to present these tulips to pay tribute to the 1.1 million Canadian servicemen that served in the Second World War.
Your Royal Highness, this is beyond all my expectations. I will treasure this. They're going to be planted in my garden.
Yes, sir. She was wonderful.
You're so wonderful.
May I kiss you?
Oh, love it too.
Oh, it's great to have you here, really.
Can I hold your hand
yeah,
again?
Sure,
I love holding beautiful girls' hands.
You know,
I'm very proud of being a part of what I was a part of. And I think all Canadians should be. What we did accomplish, makes you feel that was well worthwhile of doing what we did. But then you also think, why can't we have better understanding amongst human beings today?
Is this in World War II?
Yep, that's a tank in World War II. Here's another one. No, that one belonged to the 116th Battalion.
It's a message Don now shares with his great-grandkids.
And down here is the barbed wire. If you notice the trench here, see the barbed wire on the top? If you see that barbed wire, is a little different than this barbed wire, because this is actually some wire from the trenches in World War I. You see the leather jacket on that mannequin? Well, that was only issued to dispatch riders, the guys that rode motorcycles. Everybody didn't get one of those, just the dispatch rider.
Important history lessons Bill hopes Canadian children start to learn before it's too late.
Well, we would like to see the Board of Education teach our children the history. When I went to school here in Ontario, I went from the bottom to the top. We were in history, in public school. We had the history book of the British people. Then we had a history book that we had to read and pass exams on, history of Canada and what Canada done. At that time, the First War was the last part. You know, you can't forget your past. You have to understand your past. You have to know your history. Any civilized country, you have to teach your children so they would know. They wouldn't know if you don't teach them. We're proud of Canada. My dad was always proud of Canada. And we serve our country. We're proud for that. It was our duty.
The Canadian government had been planning to send a delegation to the Netherlands for commemorative ceremonies, which have now been cancelled because of COVID-19.